Welcome back to the Self Indulgent Podcast. I'm your host, Mariah. Today, we are talking about the nervous system. This is a topic I'm becoming increasingly passionate about because we really are at the mercy of our nervous system. I know that sounds crazy and scary, but that's the truth. I'm excited to talk more about it with you guys. I think it can be life changing to understand your nervous system. It's just something that we're not taught about enough. As I'm learning about it, I'm just like, why don't we learn this in school? Why does nobody know this? This is why we have such issues with emotional maturity, conflict, relationships. It really all ties in and can be connected back to the nervous system and trauma. I am very excited to talk about it today. But first, I want to start with setting an intention for today's episode. If you did not watch my last episode, you should go back and watch it. It was a turning point for me learning more about intentions and how to incorporate it for myself and the power of intention setting. So I'm going to start doing that every episode. I want to get more into a practice of intention setting and really ground myself in that. So today's intentions, I did write them down already, are to speak my truth and my history, like things that I've been through, and also to help others understand themselves better, help others connect with themselves better. And then I have to love myself and have compassion for myself and whatever comes up throughout this conversation, and to breathe and take my time. Those are my intentions for today's episode. I think I want to talk about the nervous system and kind of break it into parts. So, I'm not going to get into the science of it all yet. I will do that in a different episode because I think it can be overwhelming amount of information. I'm just going to kind of go through some things that I think you can connect to and maybe you've experienced. And in another episode, I'll get super geeky about it because it is all really, really cool. So, what I've come to understand is that we have all these bad thoughts about ourselves, and in actuality, we have a whole brain that is connected to our nervous system. Our brain and our body are joined. We tend to separate the two with body, brain. No, mind and body, we're full beings. We have a mind, body, and soul. And all of those things are interconnected. The way I like to explain the different states that you can be in for the nervous system, because what we're going to talk about is like survival states. And we're talking about survival states in the nervous system because a lot of us, especially in Western culture, are on the go all the time. We are constantly in survival states. It's just, we're so dysregulated. And that's why we are having all these emotional issues. We all know the common fight, flight, freeze, and now fawn. Fawn is one that I've learned more recently. And essentially, you can think of it as appeasing someone, these people pleasing tendencies. So, all of those different states are survival states, right? At some point in childhood, there was some sort of threat, and you had to be sure that you could survive. That's why people have different ways of developing, right? So then you have fight, right? I'm going to use kids a lot in this example because that's where a lot of this stems from. So if you're on a healing journey now in adulthood, it started in childhood. So fight can, kids behavioral outbursts, right? Like that is a fight response. Like I have to protect myself. Flight is avoiding situations, running away from them, disconnecting. Then freeze. Freeze is more like dissociating, numbness, stopping, not doing anything. And then we have fawn. Like I said, that those are like I had to appease the people around me to survive, right? So I'm trying to think of an example. An example of appeasing in childhood could probably look like constantly cleaning the house and then going to your mom and being like, "Hey, I cleaned everything." Something like that. Looking for validation with others can be really hard for people who have the fawn appease survival instinct. Oftentimes, you are trying to appease the people who are creating the trauma or abuse. So it makes it very complex, and there's lots of shame and guilt that come with that. For me, appeasing would come a lot in academics. Um, or maybe extended family that I hadn't seen in a while. I wanted to be seen, validated. I was very goody two shoes. I was the kid that if the teacher said anything to me, had to redirect me or anything, I was gonna cry. I know. I know. That kid always yeah, that wasn't a fun time for me because that never looks good to peers either. Like, it could be the simplest redirect, I would cry. I would think something's bad, I'm wrong, I'm in trouble. So, yeah, and I remember that from, like, elementary school. That is something I grew out of. By the end of middle school, I think I have more adaptive ways of still kind of being in that state. The thing is, we're not gonna respond in the same way that we always did when we were kids. It's still in the body, though. That's why the nervous system is so important, because even though I don't cry, if a professor today was to say, "Hey, that's not now's the time for that," I wouldn't cry. Would I still get activated? Yeah, absolutely. I would still get activated. I'm still, because I'm healing through it, I'm learning through it, and I'm also, like, older, right? So, frontal lobe has developed, and I am a little bit more in control of my emotions, but it's gonna express differently, right? So, depending on the teacher, depending on what's happening, I will also often get, like, pissed off. Another one of my responses is fight. I go back and forth between, um, fawn in outside settings and fight. I can get very defensive. I feel like I have to protect myself, and my truth, because if I don't, I will have nothing, right? I need to at least have that. Especially as somebody who's always trying to be on their P's and Q's so they don't get in trouble, right? Like, the appeasing piece of it, the people pleasing piece of it. So when something is happening or something is being brought to my attention, or I'm feeling like I'm being blamed for something, then there's a fight instinct that kicks on. Um, and I think, it comes from, like, lots of suppressed anger. So these are just some examples of how it showed up for me. Some people tend to identify heavily with one, which is fine. That can be your main source of survival. But we are so adaptive and complex that different situations and people trigger different responses, right? At the end of the day, it's still all, whether it's any of those 4, whatever state you're in, it is still nervous system activation and hyperactivation. I don't like saying dysfunction, but you're dysregulated. That's just the state. A lot of us are in that all the time. And there's more and more research coming out that shows, like, being in chronic states of survival causes illness. Like, it causes chronic illness, or I shouldn't say causes. There's correlations between, chronic survival states and illnesses, inflammation in the body. I have lupus, and I do think some of that does come from a certain amount of stress. I was diagnosed young, relatively young for lupus. Stress was a component of that. I think of times where I had high stress and my hair was falling out. I have pictures where my eyebrows are almost not there. As stress came down, it got better. That is the power of these survival states in the nervous system. This is why you can meet a stranger, have one conversation with them, and feel off. They didn't objectively do anything bad or say anything wrong, but something about them triggered you and you're feeling things. Something triggered the survival state, whether they reminded you of somebody who, it just goes to show that so much lives in the body, right? Distance does not matter when it comes to the nervous system, as far as time has passed since said event or harm, like, doesn't matter. It's still, you're still there. So as far as in the body. And as we get older, you get better at dealing with certain things until it gets you. So this summer, it got me. And so I went into a freeze, which was complete, like, I at the time was calling it an ego death. And I would like to also, I think there's true, right? Like, I lost identity, or parts of my identity broke down. When I think about the thoughts I was having, the low place I was at this summer, I'm recognizing it as my nervous system crashed out. I was listening to the Spiraling Higher podcast, one of my favorite podcasts. If you're interested in consciousness, manifestation, and connecting with higher self, that's the podcast for you. There was this older episode I went back and listened to where I think a neuroscientist or neurologist or previous neurologist was talking about the nervous system. And she was saying that when we are in survival states, she likes to call, like, she kind of thinks there's this pipeline, like mental health disorders or nervous system dysfunction. Like, it's very connected to the nervous system at times. And so she was saying that, when you experience depression, right? Your nervous system is shutting down. The dorsal vagus nerve is on and it's like you're shutting down. It's like your body is forcing you to crash out because you have reached your limit. It mimics depression. When the nervous system does that and you're forced into rest, you will have thoughts that mimic, I don't want to be here. I don't want to do anything. I don't care about anything anymore. When she was saying that, I was just like, because when you're in those states, like, for me this summer, I thought I was losing my mind. I have never felt that passive suicide ideation to that extent in a long time, not since I was a teenager. To experience it in adulthood for the first time at that depth was hard. It was really hard. I was not okay. And to hear her say the thoughts that I was having was wild because it's just like, wow, hopefully it allows you to give yourself grace. Um, because again, I was like, what is wrong with me? Like, I'm broken, right? You beat yourself up about it when it's like your nervous system forced you to relax. It forced you to stop. For me, I think why I hit that state was because I had experienced a real change in my reality that December. And then, the semester started and I had to just keep going. I couldn't stop school. I had to keep seeing therapy clients. I was still filming this podcast week to week because I didn't want to give it up. And I was very much like, I'm not going to let this ruin those things, even though I was not myself. But I was refusing to acknowledge the pain and sadness and emotion that I was experiencing. But I shouldn't blame myself for that, right? What else was I supposed to do? I really felt like if I allowed myself to do all of that and feel all of that, I was in therapy still. I felt like I would crash out, right? I needed to be able to perform. Like, I don't need to, taking off from school just was not the option, especially with what I had already went through. And so it was kind of just like, I was trucking through, right? So that's the fight. Um, that's another piece of this puzzle of like, and this is how you switch into survival states, right? So I was in a fight. A fight looks like anxiety, often. So the thoughts, I got to keep going. I got to do this. Oh, fuck everybody else. I'm going to keep pushing, right? That's what I did to get through that semester, even though I was deeply suffering. Like, I was deeply hurt and I just kept going. I had to keep going. And then I just stopped. I stopped the podcast. The last episode aired was in April, and I was just like, "I need a break." I think what it really was I did not feel like me. I had no idea how I was going to show up on this podcast because I was disconnected from self at that point. I was going back and forth between, "Let's get it done," to I'm numb and don't want to do anything. So it was on and off, on and off. That's exhausting. Let the podcast go. The semester ended. And then I was left with myself to deal with. And I crashed out. The nervous system shut down. It said, "Oh, things are done now. You have time now? Okay, so now you're gonna sit the fuck down." So it's like, don't beat yourself up over these thoughts, right? Like, this is what I mean by we're at the mercy of our nervous system. And honestly, we shouldn't be mad at that either. Right? It's like the survival states were created through protection, through trying to help us get through these really hard times. Would you look at the young you? I'm learning that most of your nervous system is pretty much fully developed by the age of 7. Think about your life, if you can remember, from 7 younger. What was happening? What was like, if you can even maybe if you don't remember much, maybe talk to family if you can, or just people who may have known you then, if you're having a hard time remembering, because that and your relationship to your caregivers at that time, it's big deals, big deals. Like, so for me, by the age of 7, like, my biological father was out of my life or was exiting right around that time. And I don't have a lot of memories from that, but when you think about that, that's a significant event, and I know of things that have happened. So when I think about how little you really are at 7 and up to 7, and thinking about the things you had to do to ensure safety, security, and love, like, baby girl did what she could, right? The nervous system and you found a way to be here today. And if you don't do the work, then you're still operating from that, even though it's so far and you may not even remember what was going on then. This is why I'm in school to become a psychologist. So I'm a therapist, and I'm having a hard time sometimes because I'm realizing that for true healing, you cannot talk your way through true healing. It's not enough. It's very important. It's a piece, but there's so much that lives in the body. Like right now, I'm reading the famous book that I'm sure a lot of us have heard. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably heard it. The Body Keeps the Score. It lives in the body. And then we wonder, why did I snap like that? Why did I flip out like that? You got work to do. There's body work, right? So, talk therapy and all these different types of interventions and tools and coping mechanisms and modalities. And yes, I'm learning all of them. But I think that I'm no longer interested in only putting a fresh Band-Aid on issues. What's the point if I have to keep buying Band-Aids? I'd rather invest in the cure, right? Because I think in our society, cures don't exist, right? They're impossible. Nothing fix We never look at the core of an issue. We are not taught to look at the core of an issue. We don't solve problems in this country by getting at the core of the issue. We never do. It's Band-Aid after dirty ass Band-Aid, and then everything gets infected. There's some infectious shit happening in this country as a result of not dealing with core problems. And I think a large piece of why I'm so on my soapbox right now. A large reason why is because 0 accountability and recognition is happening. And this is on individual levels. This is why there are people who want the quick fix. People want the medicine. We have been trained to ask for the meds, right? Because there was a time where people did not want meds. Now we're asking, we're begging, we're medicating babies, but we're not looking at the baby's environment, the foundation. All of our foundations are cracked. And so the work and why people want the quick fix instead, the work requires you to bulldoze over that bitch to build a new foundation. That's the work, not fixing, adding a little bit of filler. That's not going to create long lasting healing. It'll make you feel better in the moment so that you can keep going, right? That nervous system that tells you to keep going, that anxiety, keep going. I need more. And it's not enough. I need more. It's not enough. How about we ask why it's not enough? Let's get curious. Why is it not enough? Why do you have to keep going? What do you think happens if you stop? You have to look at yourself, accountability, right? And I'll get into another podcast episode about forgiveness because I don't want to go into that in this topic, but there's so much power in forgiveness for you, not for the other person. not for the people who have hurt you. It's freedom when you can forgive and finally let go. You take your power back when you can get to that point. It requires hard work. It requires core stuff, right? So, bringing it back to the nervous system, if you want to heal, how are you going to do that with a new mindset, but the same body, the same nervous system? How are you going to do that? New mindset, same survival state. If you're in your healing journey and feel stuck, that's why. I think this is part of why, right? We got to do deeper work. We got to release stuff from the body because, you downloaded the new update, but you didn't install anything. You didn't get rid of the old stuff so you can clear way for the new. You got to make space, you got to delete some files. And you do that through releasing energy, and it's requires body work. I had a whole list. Okay. I had a whole list of stuff to talk about, and I totally just rambled for 25 minutes. So when I think more about what I mean by the core and body work and healing the body, I think another way to think about all this stuff is that you are your trauma. And I don't mean that in the sense of that's your identity, because that's a dangerous slope. I'm planning the whole thing on this victimness that really holds us back. That is a very interesting topic to me because I've been through it. I still go through it. I think I have tendencies sometimes, and I got to check myself, right? Because when you are identifying with your trauma and as the victim, you are giving your power away to that. You are no longer in power and it consumes you. What I mean by you are your trauma is your body, the physical nervous system exists in that way, right? So you operate in that way. If you created this nervous system in childhood from adverse childhood experiences or ACEs. When we talk about trauma, little T trauma, big T trauma, if your needs were not met, it could have ended up turning into some form of trauma for you. So neglect is trauma. That is technically child abuse. And there are levels to neglect, right? But when needs are not met and you internalize these things, it can show up as trauma. You create a survival state. If you created a survival state in childhood based on trauma or adverse experiences, it creates who you are. How many people do you know who had a poor relationship with their parents, experienced a lot of pain from their parents, and then become their parents? That's what I mean by you are your trauma until you do the work. You operate from that operating system, right? No updates have come in. You can't until you do the work or at least acknowledge it. You're going to still be using the same operating system. So that's what I mean by you are your trauma, not from an identity standpoint. It's these patterns, habits, and behaviors and interaction with others is oftentimes where you'll see it, where it'll come up, where you're like, oh, why do I do that? Why am I, you know what I mean? Like it'll come up today in your relationships usually. So that is what I mean by your trauma in that sense. It is hard work to, or maybe I should stop saying that, but it is work to do the body work, to work through there. It takes a lot, right? So therapy, yes, therapy is great because therapy will help you gain insight into patterns, behaviors. It makes you more self-aware. It kind of works on all of those fronts. However, then we need to take it to the next step. So it looks like reconstructing your nervous system, which is difficult, right? Like you've been operating this way for how many decades, potentially? So it's hard work. And I think that's why you hear things like breath work, right? Yoga, right? There's studies that show that yoga is really great for trauma because it connects you back to the body. Not that it heals or gets rid of the trauma, but it forces you to get back into the body because when we've experienced trauma or adverse experiences and have these really strong survival states, we disconnect from the body, right? You are not just a walking mind. You came in here in a body with a nervous system. The brain is the body. We like to separate it. If you are brain dead, you are dead. You're not doing anything else. The brain is the body. We take it offline. You might feel numb or like you feel like what is you're losing purpose, you're losing meaning, you're not connected, right? Like so we need to find our way back into the body. You've disconnected because you've been taught that the body is not safe. Whatever you've experienced, whether that be a type of trauma that does have to do with the body, or you have experienced such arousal in the nervous system, that feeling is terrifying. It is a horrible feeling. So you're offline now. Now you don't feel things. Lots of suppression until they bubble up and pop, right? And then you pop every now and then. So it's really important to be in your body, right? You have one life, one body, and a lot of us are very disconnected from it. And it's because we were taught that it's not safe, right? At some point, the message became, it is not safe to be in my body. These feelings are horrible. This is terrifying. I need to numb out. This is where addictions become possible because at that point, you're looking for quick fixes. You're looking for the meds, right? Drugs, alcohol, shopping. All of these things contribute to the numbing process because you can't feel things, because you're offline and you're not in your body and you can't, so that you don't feel all the negative, you cannot feel the positive. So what do? We look for the quick, cheap dopamine hits, right? Like scrolling, drugs, alcohol, whatever it is. So overall, connecting to the body becomes really important, right? Because you can come home to you. This is when they say the body is a temple, this is your home, right? You spend your whole life here. So why be disconnected to it? Um, and if you want to feel and experience things, it's going to require you to do that work. And so that's where you hear somatics, right? Somatics, that's a pop term, pop culture, pop, psych, pop, whatever. What is a popular term now? Soma means the body, I believe, Greek for the book. It has to do with working with the body, right? And these healing and therapeutic modalities. It can look like breath work. There's a lot of research at this point to show that breath work really does do things for the body and the brain, right? It helps to rest. What other ways to recover and to feel safe in the body again is through really deep rest, right? In that podcast I mentioned earlier, they were talking about how the very first thing you can start to do to reset and reprieve the nervous system is deep rest. And I don't mean sleeping. It doesn't require you to be knocked out because you go to bed every night and it's not healing it. It's not enough, right? You're so tightly wound that your body in sleep is probably trying to help fight inflammation and disease. There's so much going on. Sleep is important at the end of the day for recovery and rest in a lot of different ways, right? This is why they say it improves cognitive functioning. If you're getting deep rest, the body at night can do what it needs to do so you can operate. If you're so depleted to begin with, it's not going to be able to catch up at night. That's not enough, especially if you're living in a survival state. So, what deep rest can also look like is getting rid of all sensory stuff. So, dark, quiet,
rest. That can look like one of those flotation therapy places, which is so funny because she mentioned it in the episode and I work at one. So that'll be, I tried for the first time the other day with no music in the room. Like I always do it pitch black in the float tank. If you don't know what that is, it's just at my job, it's a room that you walk into. What most commonly people know about is pods and tanks where you have to go in this pod and close the thing over you. In mine, it's not like that. Basically, you lay in Epsom salt water, so it forces you to float. So if you can't float, you don't have to worry about it. It's only like 10 inches of water. It forces you to float, and then you just lay there. You have control. So you can either turn the light off or keep it on. You can turn the music up or down. The sensory stuff is completely up to you. For the first time last week, I tried it with no music because usually I'll bring in a guided meditation to do. But after listening to the podcast episode, I wanted to try it with complete silence, complete darkness. Um, and not gonna lie, the first 15 minutes were hard for me. And it's so funny because I've always done it in the dark. And all of a sudden, I got scared of the dark. I was scared um in the silence. And I was shocked at how unnerved I was because my mind started having paranoid thoughts that I used to have as a kid. I was a very paranoid kid. I thought somebody was going to come in. I was in a very vulnerable position. And I was just thinking about what that meant to be vulnerable in my body and really just have to sit with that for the first time in a long time. This is kind of what she was talking about, right? If you have not felt safe in your body in a long time, when you take away all the things and you're vulnerable. I was naked. I was naked in the tub, right? In the pod. Most people do get in because it's a private experience. I was very vulnerable because you're laid out, like you're floating. So you're laid out, my arms are out. I mean, that's like a real state of vulnerability. I was scared. I was nerved, very uneasy. And it subsided. It took about 15. What I ended up doing was I was trying to think, like, why am I so scared? What am I scared of? What's coming up for me? Like, I was really contemplating, like, turning music on, or turning the light on because I had opted in to not have music at all. So it's not like I could turn it up or anything. So I almost turned the light on because I was just and I was like, no, Mariah, this is the point. The point is to be able to sit with self so you can deep rest. Deep rest is getting rid of all stimulation, right? We are constantly being stimulated. This is an hour for you to lay in quiet darkness with no stimulation so your body can rest, so you can give back your body that time. And I ended up envisioning, I don't even know how this happened, but I ended up envisioning a child self. This child version of myself popped up. And I was sitting on a bed with her. She was in bed. And I said to her, "You can rest now. I'm here. You can rest now." And she went to sleep. And I'm trying not to get emotional talking about this now. But she went to sleep and I sat there and let her sleep. After that, I still felt some anxiety, but I did finally let go. I was not expecting to cry telling that. Yeah, so it was powerful for me. I think it became very clear to me that the fear was coming from my nervous system, always looking for I sleep with a fan on. I sleep with sound. So getting rid of having to lay there in the dark was hard at first. I'm proud of myself. I got through it. By the end, I didn't want it to end. I wanted to rest some more. You don't need to go and spend money and do a float tank to do that. You can, what I've done before trying it, which wasn't as activating as the float room, but because I'm in my house and I could take off the sleep mask, but basically, you can just lay on the floor with a sleep mask. They're really cheap. You can get them at a beauty supply store, Amazon, something like that. Sleep mask, noise canceling headphones or earplugs, whichever. And if you can make it dark in the room, make it dark in the room. The sleep mask and closing your eyes would take care of most of it. Noise canceling and just lay there. Just lay there. Challenge yourself to lay there as long as possible. And eventually, your nervous system will calm down. It's going to feel threatening because we're always being stimulated all the time, especially if you're on the go, 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 go. So just challenge yourself, right? If it's becoming distressing and you're gonna, coming into panic attack, get up. Maybe for you, start with breath work. Look up breath work practices, somatic breath work practices on YouTube. If you are in therapy, talk to your therapist about it and maybe try it together, right? So you have somebody there with you. If you want to try sensory deprivation and you feel very, you should trust your therapist to sit there with you while you try to do that. If so that if you do get panicked and it's starting to come up, if you need to process that with her or him or they, you can. So just keep that in mind. Um, because I don't want you freaking out, but I just wanted to share my experience because it was alarming at first, right? And that did show me that I had more work to do and I have trouble resting in a deep way. But that's how we start to heal. That's how we start to show our bodies that we are safe. They talk about corrective emotional experiences. We're showing the nervous system and reprogramming the nervous system to understand that it is safe. The body is safe and you can exist in the body. I actually had quite a bit of anxiety that week, which told me I was coming back into the body because I was telling my friend, like, I don't feel things. I'm not really feeling much recently. So I started trying to do stuff like that. And all of a sudden, I started to feel anxiety, physically feel it in the nervous system, in my body, which told me that I was connecting back to the body. So it's like these layers, right? I was probably in more of a freeze, numb, depressive state, disconnected. And the lady was saying, in order to get to a calm, peaceful state, because there's a nerve for that, this state that says we can rest. I forget what the nerve is called. But you go if you're at the crash out, like depressed, numb, freeze, right? You actually, in order to get to that calm state, you actually have to get activated again. You have to move into um the this like that go, 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 like that anxiety one, right? So I think what happened for me is I went from the numbness to the next level, right? Which is the anxiety, the go, go, go. And actually, if you're there, that's great because you're just one step away from the I can rest, I can be calm, I can be present state. It's actually right there. But if you're in the crash out, you got to get there first, right? You got to activate, right? Because how are you going to, if you're crashed out and not feeling anything, how are you going to feel calm? So we got to get you activated first. So if you are in the depressed state or this freeze numbness, the goal is to try to have you feel something again. Having you feel something again could look like get up and dance, get up and walk, and you will feel better. And I know, listen. I know I was crashed out this summer. I know it's easier said than done. I know feel the eye rolls. I feel them. I know. But even if you could just do something to make you move, right? We need to activate the system. The system needs to start to feel something. That's how you can start to move from depressed to activated. And then once you're more activated, still trying these deep resting practices throughout because stuff is going to come up. If you can keep a journal next to you, if you try these sensory deprivation things, stuff is going to come up like it came up for me because now you have to sit with self. You have to, right? Because nothing is happening. There's no stimulation. You can't distract yourself with your phone. You are there with your thoughts, period. And the goal is to let them pass, right? It's more about just laying there. This is not, I know it does kind of sound like being like a meditative state, which it will probably bring you to a meditative state or at least the theta brainwave. But that's not necessarily what I want you to worry about when you're doing this. I want you to worry about just being able to lay there with no stimulation. If you want to take note of what comes up, take mental notes and then write it down after. Stuff is going to come up. But the goal is to move through. I'm less concerned about you getting wrapped up in whatever comes up in the thoughts and more so allowing it to pass and getting past the activation, the fear, whatever it is that comes up for you, the discomfort, to allow yourself to rest deeply so you can do more, more, so that you can feel safe in your body again. It's really important. Okay. I could talk about this for another hour, but I'm not going to because I got stuff to do. So, I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I really did. I love this topic. I partly love it because this is the next stage of a healing journey, getting back in the body. I really hope you guys enjoyed this. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. I really want to hear your thoughts, what you know about this topic, any other questions you have if you've never heard about this stuff before. I think it's really important. If you're comfortable sharing your experiences, I'd love to hear them. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave me a 5-star review if you enjoy and hit the follow button so you can be notified every time I post. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time.